Hi everyone, my name is Rowan. I manage the Melbourne Accelerator program, and thanks for coming down to this MAP masterclass with Duncan Anderson from Edrolo, which is an online education startup. Clearly his English isn't very good, so I'm not sure how qualified he is. No, I'm joking. So Duncan has had a long and industrious career. He was at Goldman Sachs initially after university, then went and spent a few years working at Google in strategy before, and all the time with an ulterior motive of figuring out how to start your own business. And then, I don't know, we met Duncan for the first time when we took the startups in 2012 to Sydney for the first time that the program started, and Duncan was good enough to host us at Google. And so after being at Google for a couple of years, decided to quit and started a business called Tutor on Demand, which has since morphed into Edrolo with a couple of friends. They participated in StartMate in 2013. They raised a bit of money at the end of that as well. And about 2 weeks ago, it was announced that you had closed a round of funding from Airtree Ventures, $2.6 million, I believe, from Airtree, which is, and we were talking about it before, probably the best performing venture capitalist in Australian history in Daniel Petrie. And I'm sure Duncan can talk to you a bit more about that. Anyway, please make Duncan feel welcome for tonight's masterclass.
Get ready for my really beautiful presentation. I made this last night and on Sunday. Yay. All right, Rowan did a bit of a brief introduction. So yeah, I'm 31. I went to Melbourne University here. I did engineering and commerce from 2002 to 2006. Finished with honours, worked for a couple of years at Goldman Sachs. Then I worked at a hedge fund where I covered tech stocks. Then I worked at Google. I quit Google 2.5 years ago to do Edrolo full-time. So we started this whilst I was working full-time, and we worked on it in the nighttime. We've raised 2 separate rounds for about $4 million in total. I can talk to you about that if you want. We have a full-time team of 15, and we're hiring in engineering, sales, marketing. So if anyone wants a job, just be hungry and tenacious. Come speak to me. All right, so what am I going to talk about? To me, this is kind of one way you could visualize the journey of building a startup. At the beginning, you have an idea, and then you have to try and get that from an idea into some kind of a company. And normally the first stage is being able to get seed funding, which I'll put at $500,000 to $2 million of money, and then from there to Series A and on. So I'm going to talk today about what I think you should do after you've had an idea, but before you've got your company to a place where you can raise seed funding, which is that $500,000 to $2 million part. So there's other sections, obviously. If you want to know about having an idea, the best thing I've seen is Paul Graham's Startup Ideas, so go read that. There's lots and lots of stuff about after you've kind of hit Series A. We've got a couple of books, but there's blogs and everything, like The Hard Thing About Hard Things or Founder's Dilemma. But this is not what I'm talking about. So the first question is, on there's raising money. So should you raise money? To me, the answer is yes. Unless you've got a lot of money yourself, you're going to need to build a team to build your dream, and the best way to do that is by raising money. Money's cheap now as well, which means you can get a lot of money for not much equity. So what are the downsides? In a seed round, you'll normally give up 20 to 25% of your company. But will your company be 20 to 25% more likely to succeed, or 20 to 25% more valuable? I think the answer is generally yes. So it's a good bargain to make. What you're giving up is less value than what you're getting. Also, the only other reason I can think of is that you'll spend money on stupid stuff. Like, don't worry, you will spend money on stupid stuff, but it won't kill you, so it's okay. You sort of go from this period of having no money, if you're us, to having like 7 figures in the bank, and you're like, whee! And you spend it on silly things initially, and then you get really scared and you worry about money you're spending. But anyways, whatever, you should raise money. This is what the payoff diagram kind of looks like to me if you're raising money. So it's higher at this point, because if you raise money, you normally have a pre-money and then you get cash. So you might have a pre-money of $4 million and then you raise $1 million, so that means you're worth $5 million. So that's that difference there. Then you've got a longer runway till you die if you spend it all. But also what you don't realize half the time is that you learn massively as things are ongoing, and you're going to find opportunities that you didn't know existed when you find out about them. And sometimes you don't have the money to go and act on that opportunity, to seize that opportunity. But if you've got funding, then you're basically, your ability to go or to seize that is higher. So I think the potential value is also higher. So this is also another representation of why it makes sense to raise money. Finally, the top 12 VC or top 12 tech companies listed in the US by market cap all took venture capital. That changes because the value of companies changes day to day, so that mightn't be true. So don't quote me on that, but it used to be like 6 months ago. So anyways, basically venture capital can help. Don't be scared of raising. We spent a lot of time thinking about whether it made sense, and I think it was, in hindsight, silly use of time. The answer is yes. Okay, so you agree that it makes sense to raise money. So then the first step is getting to the seed funding place. So you've got an idea, how do you get from there to a place where you can raise $500,000 to $2 million? In here, I've got this thing like incubators. So MAP is an incubator, Angel Cube, StartMate, they're all incubators. I think they can be very useful, so definitely consider doing it. I would say definitely do it. But anyways, what do you need? So you've got a good idea. Then you also need to have a team. If you can't get anyone to join you, then you don't have a good idea in general. You need to be able to convince someone to jump overboard. You also need to have good timing. You might be doing something too early, that's going to be bad. So you've got these three things. Are you all sorted? No, unfortunately. Ideas are easy. Execution is everything. It takes a team to win. So what do I think you need? You need a good idea, a good team, good timing. Then you also need a plan. You need to be able to execute, and you need to be able to work well together. So what am I going to talk about? I think the top part's a given. If you haven't got that, then you haven't kind of got the ingredients. But just because you've got the ingredients doesn't mean you can make something from them. So I'm going to talk about these bottom three things: a plan, to execute, and how to work well together. So the first step of this is plan. All right. So first part of a plan to me is figuring out where you need to go. So if our goal is to get to ability to be able to raise seed funding, what data points do you need to be able to raise? And a lot of people don't think about this. They just set off and they're like, I'm going to make something, I'm going to get progress. Like, where are you going? Like, why is this important? So doing important things is really what it needs to happen. And figuring out what data points you need to raise will then allow you to do the important things. It'll help you prioritize. So I know there are a lot of different businesses, but if you're talking about general software startups, the first thing you need is a big opportunity. So e.g. $100 million. So sit down and figure out if you have a big opportunity. I'll talk about that more. The next thing is early traction. Unless you have a team with history or crazy patents, which you might have, then you're going to need traction. No traction, no raising money. No story is going to get you $500,000 to $2 million. So what does that look like? If you're ad supported, it's 100,000 active users. I think if you get that kind of data, you can raise. If you didn't raise money, it's because you sucked at fundraising, and you can suck at fundraising. And two, you've had $50,000. So if you're charging, you've had $50,000 or more since you launched. So these actually aren't that hard, in my opinion. I'm not saying they're easy, but this is kind of attainable, right? You can get $50,000. Don't hold me to this. Markets move. So, maybe we have a recession next year and no one will give you any money. And then also, you've got to have a plan to get from $50,000 to $1 million revenue, and then to $10 million. So you need all of these three things. And this is just kind of understanding, is the idea any good? How big is the idea? And what are the first data points? So this number two is kind of the most important part here. If you've got these other two, you need to talk to them. Then you need to make a plan around getting to this. But very quickly, just the first one, some people seem to struggle with a little bit, so I'll talk about it. So how do you get to the first one? So how do I get to $1 million? Then how am I going to get to $10 million? Then how am I going to get to $100 million? Don't worry. So I would do this exercise, just sit down and talk with your teammates. How ridiculous this sounds. It just needs to be possible if the stars align. Sometimes people are focusing on something that's only going to be $5 million. If that's the case, it's going to be very hard to raise money, if you ask me. What happens if you can't get to $100 million? That's kind of okay as long as you're in a really fast-growing market. So maybe it's only $10 million now, but in 3 years it's going to be $100 million. And the other one is just otherwise make sure it can be used by lots and lots of people. So I would say most people should be able to do this 1, 10, 100, but there are businesses like, Instagram that didn't exist. So you need to be able to sort of think about some of these things and just make sure they can be big. Don't worry that most of this will be wrong. It doesn't matter, it just needs to be plausible. So you should be able to tell someone, yes, it's kind of possible, and they're like, okay, cool. So here's a couple of examples. So here's Edrolo. So when we were talking to people, and this is just for Australia because we talk a global story as well. Textbooks, so this is top down, $450 million, and private tuition, it's $2 billion. So those are the two markets we're sort of going after in Australia. And then from a bottom-up point of view, we started just in year 12, just in Victoria. So there are 40,000 kids in year 12. We can monetize, we had data that we could monetize at $100 a head. So that's a $4 million opportunity. So they're like, all right, well, if you guys can make, some way towards a couple of $1 million, then you'll figure out how to go from that couple to 10 million and so on. So how about an advertising model? I just picked Twitter randomly. This is probably not the best example, but display advertising is like $70 billion a year. And Facebook monetizes at about $10 per person per year. So this means that I can monetize at $10 per person per year as well. So if you have 100 million users, then you're going to be able to do $1 billion of revenue. There's just stacking up numbers and ways to talk about it. So one's top down, it's a big market, but then bottom up, how do I get to those numbers is something you should be able to talk about. All right, so that's kind of a plan. And the major part of this first part of the plan is just how do I get to this first 50K or this first 100,000 users? Now you need to execute. So if you're in MAP or an incubator, you've normally got 12 weeks. And you can actually do a lot in 12 weeks. It sounds short, but you can. So what you need to do is take what it looks like to get $50,000 of revenue, or what it looks like to these users, and then break it into 12 parts. So normally I would say do 1 week sprints, which is a part. Don't do 2 to begin with, it's too long. But some people do 2. And then you're going to try and make 1/12 progress along this path to this land where you can raise money. Don't worry that your plan will be wrong. You will adjust it as you go, but you won't necessarily know how to prioritize if you don't have some idea of where you're trying to get to. So you want to have 1 week plan, and then you're going to try and set this, and you're going to adjust the thing. So what do you have in your 1 week plan? First of all, you must write things down. The number of people that don't write things down is insane. This is the best study that I've seen on this. So there's people from Harvard. 3% of people at Harvard in this study they did had written plans, had goals, and had written them down. These people made 10 times the money of everybody else put together. Then 13% had goals, but they weren't written down. They made twice the money of the other people, and then 84% had no goals and nothing was written, and they did considerably worse. So you'll be surprised, like just writing down something and saying you'll do it means that you are so much more likely to do it. And the main reason you don't get stuff done is because you concentrate on the wrong things, or you spend lots of time doing stuff but not doing important things. So you must write things down. Okay, so for your first week, what are you going to do? Each team member is going to write down the top 3 things that they need to accomplish for that week in order. And then once you've written this down, you send it an email, you're going to stick it in Trello if you use that kind of stuff. Each goal must be SMART. That's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. I'll give you an example of one on the next page. Once you've written the 3 things that you've gotten for this first week, you then send it to each other, and then you have a meeting for half an hour to an hour where you discuss as a team whether you think the priorities that others have put forward are right and make sense or not. You don't all have to agree that that your priorities weren't, taken as the right ones, but you must decide as a team what the things to do are, and then you must do what the team decides. Excuse me. If anyone is doing something else, it's time to be very unhappy and consider getting rid of that person. But what happens at the end of the week is basically, if you haven't done the first thing on that list, what you said you'd do, the most important thing, then it's time to have a good, long, hard look in the mirror and ask yourself questions about why this didn't happen. And don't worry, you won't, probably the first week, have done that. You'll have done lots of things and you'll be like, how the hell, at the end of this week, did I not do the thing that I thought was the most important? And this is one of the things that I think is the most important to getting stuff done is discipline. Like training your mind to be able to focus and do the things that you said you would do is actually really difficult. And this is kind of a way to map that out and to have responsibility and reportability on it. So what do I think you should have in your first week? First week needs to be speaking to customers. You do not need product. You do not need anything. You must speak to customers. If you haven't done that, I really don't know why. So here's a SMART goal for this. I'm going to speak to 10 customers, and I've written out what the questions are going to be. So we've agreed as a team what questions we're going to ask, and we're going to ask all of them. Then I'm going to summarize all. So to speak to 10 customers, you might have to cold call 100 or whatever it is, right? But you're going to actually speak to 10. I'm going to summarize the answers, create conclusions, and then send an email to the team by the end of the week. So that might be your number 1 priority for that week. So if you're speaking to customers, you don't have a product, ask them for money. Don't be scared. You need to ask them for money and say you'll give them a 50% discount when the product launches in 2 months. And that mightn't happen, but ask them, you need to get some proper signal. So as a side point, when we were launching our US product, we built the sample for it, which was 5% of the product. And then we said, hey, now you like this, get the other 95%, but pay. Except it didn't exist. So when they put in their credit card, it said, error, sorry, you haven't been charged. And we got a real signal about whether people like this product, not, put your email in for when we sign up. Yeah, I've got 2,000 signups. It doesn't mean much. It's a very, very poor data signal. Okay, so I think speaking to people should be in the first week. And the other thing, if you haven't read it, read Paul Graham's essay on do things that don't scale. So go to extraordinary lengths to acquire your first customers. It doesn't matter how you get them, just get them. It doesn't matter how uneconomic it is, how unscalable it is, just get them any way you can. And then once you've got them, do anything to make sure they're happy, because you need to learn whether or not you've built something that's good or not. And you hold their hands through every single step of the way. And you'll be amazed when you hold people's hands, they'll stay there with you and they'll tell you what's wrong. But most of the time, they don't like the product, no one speaks to them about it, and they leave. So you're not going to do that. Okay, how much time should you be spending on planning? I think people systemically underinvest in planning. They're like, I need to get stuff done, So they go about doing stuff, but that's not actually what delivers progress. Doing the right thing or doing the right things is what delivers progress. And so I think you should be spending, as a rule of thumb for me, half a day a week on reflecting on how you did, on planning, and then having a meeting. If you're spending less than an hour, you're doing too little. If you're spending a day, you're doing too much, in my opinion. But most people have this at like half an hour or something for the week, something insanely small. They're just running around doing stuff with this whirlwind, but not actually concentrating on what they want to do. Okay, so I've talked a bit about a plan. I've talked about how to execute. I know this is really high level and pushing through. We can get into details if you want. And the last one is you need to work together. So they say there's two major reasons why startups fail early, pre-seed round. One, they run out of money. Two, they can't work together. I've seen plenty of startups blow up because they can't work together. So I'll talk a little bit about how I think you can work well together. So this is the anatomy of a high-performing team. First level is trust. So I'll talk about how to get trust. But when you have trust, then you can have that meeting that I talked about where you say, here are my 3 goals, and you can disagree with them and not worry that they're going to hate you or that this is some ego type thing. You need to be able to have tension in your decision-making and to distress test what's happening. So once you have trust, then you can have conflict about things. Once you've had this meeting about conflict, then you commit to what you're going to do. And you commit to what the team decided to do, not what you want to do, despite what everyone else says to do. You need accountability. So you've committed to doing something, which is email. Now, let's actually make sure we do it and hold ourselves to it. So let's check in a week's time whether we did that, and let's see the results. And if you can get these things to work, then you're going to do well. All right, so how do you get the bottom layer of trust? Well, this is a slight aside point. Like truth, which is trust and truth are kind of interlinked to me. I think you're basically what you're trying to do is find truth, not your subjective truth. You're trying to find what Ray Dalio calls absolute truth. Truth is product market fit. Truth is growth. Truth is understanding what you need to do. So if you're in a team, you're looking for truth, basically. And if you, conflict in the pursuit of truth builds trust. So conflict is a part of good functioning teams. You shouldn't be scared of it. Conflict not in the pursuit of truth is politics, and this breaks teams. So you need to make sure you're having the right kind of outcomes, not just conflict for the hell of it. And get rid of your ego. You're just here to learn. You're here to find truth, not prove that you're smart or something. Don't worry, you're going to make a whole lot of wrong decisions. This is another one I see. People get paralyzed. What if the decision we make is wrong? Don't worry. Just make any decision and learn if it's wrong, and then make a better decision next time. So the only way you're going to learn, say pain plus reflection equals progress, and put pain as being wrong there. So you need to go and do this. Don't worry about being wrong. Just worry about not making decisions. Worry about not learning whether that decision was right or wrong. Okay, so how do we build trust in Edrolo? There's a few ways here. So first of all, we send an email each week where we track our motivation out of 10. So 5 is average, and I say, last week I was 4, and I moved to a 5 this week. And what moved me to a 5? And you actually understand what drives you, and then you see sometimes I'm just being silly. I don't know why I think I'm feeling bad, but because I shouldn't be. And so then you say, yeah, we made a win, or nah, something really fell over, like this big customer left us, and this is really hurting me, and here's why. So if you understand the psychology of your teammates, you can help and support them, and then you'll get through this, because there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows, and you need to support each other or else you're stuffed. Second of all is execution out of 10. 5 is average again. Here you say, I was 3. This week, what did I do well, what did I do badly? And you say the thing you did badly. So if someone does something badly, and people will do bad stuff, or they'll do a poor job of it, and they say they did a poor job of it, then you don't hate them. But if they don't know they did it, then you worry about them doing this same bad thing over and over again. And then you sort of start to second guess them, you're trying to guide it into place, and you're like, why is this happening? So if you report your execution, then you start to basically open lines of communication. And if you see that someone did something bad, and they know they did something bad, then you don't care about it. They're going to try and fix it. It's all good. You're going to make mistakes as well. The second part is what we talked about before. You need to have a weekly priority list. You need to email them out. You discuss as a team and have a report back and say, well, what happened? Why didn't I do the top 3 things? Why did they only do the bottom of the top 3, not the other 2? And then I'm not going to do that again next week. And the final one what I'll talk about in depth here, which is once a quarter goals, 3 positives, 3 negatives. Okay, I think you should write down and tell your team your personal goals for the year. Then you should write down and tell your team the goals for the company. And then you want to do 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses for yourself and for your teammates. And you need to have an example for each of these strengths and weaknesses. No example, no strength or weakness. Then discuss this with each other. This is going to take 1 to 4 hours. But at the end of this, and we do this basically every 3 to 4 months, it's a stress release system. Like if something's been built up and you can't have a forum to say it. And if you find cancer early, you cure it. If you find cancer when it's a big ass lump, you're screwed. So what this is doing is allowing cancer to be cured at an early point, because you have a way to bring it up without it being like some confrontation or like, I hate it when you do this. Like that can't happen. Then the other person won't react well, and then you're not working too well as a team. So to me, this was an amazing stress release system. So we went through StartMate. We were working from 8 a.m. in the morning till 11 p.m. at night, living in the same house together, cooking together. Like there was this supreme pressure cooker, and you can fall apart as a team, and you don't want that to happen because that's not the reason you should die. It should die because it's a bad idea, not because you couldn't work together. And so I think this has been an amazing way for us to be able to get to understand each other, to open lines of communication, and to solve things that were problems so that they're no longer problems. So that's roughly a summary. So you need a good idea, good team, good timing, a plan, which we talked about, to execute and to work well together. Sort of just touched on some of those ideas. Here's a bit of a recap of things you might want to do. And we're hiring, so yeah, if you want a job, come speak to me.